Hi, this is Bobby Kimbrough, and welcome to Off the Cuffs. I'm very excited today. With me, I have one of my friends, great man, not to mention a great Omega man, but that's another conversation. The Chancellor of Winston Salem State, Dr. Robinson. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today. Welcome to Off the Cuffs.
Well, thank you for the invitation to be with you. I follow Off the Cuff. It's a very
wow.
special show. So I was waiting and wondering when was I
see
going to
that?
get an
He's so
opportunity
kind.
to come on Off the Cuff. So thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate the opportunity.
I appreciate you. Well, while I know you, a lot of people don't know you.
Yeah.
Tell us, where you from, Doc? Where you originally from?
Well, when I tell people where I'm from, then they have to, go to a map or atlas or something to try to figure it out. I'm from North Carolina. I'm from the eastern part of North Carolina. And I tell folks I'm from Sampson County because you have to, when you come from a small town, Ivanhoe, you say you're from the entire county.
Right.
So I'm from Ivanhoe, North Carolina. It's kind of at the intersection between Sampson, Bladen, and Pender County. It sits in that nexus. Small community, about 250 people. That's how I grew up. Small town, rural values. That's kind of who I am.
Wow. So where did you go to undergrad at?
I went to undergraduate at North Carolina Central University.
Okay.
And so first generation student, the first campus I'd ever set foot on when I went to NCCU in 1974. So I was there for a while. I got my undergraduate degree in psychology. And so I'm on my way to becoming a psychologist because that's what appealed to me.
Okay.
But I knew I couldn't just with an undergraduate degree. So I leave there and I go to Fisk University where I do a master's degree. They had a joint program, Sheriff, at the time between Fisk University and Meharry Medical College.
Okay.
Wonderful, wonderful program. Spent 2 years there, and then I went on to Penn State. So I'm a Nittany Lion. So we're there. I got my doctorate from Penn State. Came back to North Carolina, did my internship and postdoc at Duke Medical Center.
Wow.
So I spent some time there. And while I was at Duke, there was a position that opened up in North Carolina Central. I was prepared to become a psychologist and have a practice and do all the things that psychologists do, and never thought that I'd end up in higher education. But as fate would have it, I ended up in higher education as a professor at North Carolina Central University.
Wow. And so how did you end up here? So you were a professor at Central, and then what?
So I'm a professor at Central. I'm there. I go through the professorial ranks. I was a department chair. I was a dean at North Carolina Central.
Wow.
So that was good for me. I left in I don't know the years now, Sheriff, but it was somewhere around 2011 and 2012 to go up to Massachusetts. And I was there as provost at a college, Cambridge College University.
Yeah.
And Cambridge College is interesting. It's a non-traditional college for adult learners. Cambridge College was in this space in 1960 before anybody ever really thought about it. But the school, Sheriff, sits between MIT and Harvard.
Oh, yeah.
And so every day that I went to work, I had these two world-renowned universities on either side of me. And anyone who's ever been to Cambridge, Massachusetts, or Harvard or MIT, Sheriff, everybody that comes there, they're convinced that they're going to change the world.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to make a huge difference. And the energy there is tremendous. I'm a Southerner.
Right.
I'm in New England.
Yeah.
It's a different culture altogether.
Sure is.
And so I knew that I probably would not be in Massachusetts too long.
So I know a little bit about Cambridge. So I used to go to Cambridge during the summers. My uncle taught school up at Cambridge High School up there. And so I used to go on the campus of Harvard and over MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I spent a little time up there. Matter of fact, several years ago, I went up there and was on a radio show up there talking about criminal behavior and a lot of other things. Yeah. Very impressive place. But guess what? I never knew that about you. I never knew. I just knew that you came from Central.
Mm-hmm.
I never knew the places that you had been prior to that and after that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So when did you get to Winston as the chancellor?
I came in 2015. So when I was at Cambridge College, I had this opportunity, and they were looking for a new chancellor. Certainly, I knew I wanted to come back to North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
And when I was provost, and when you're provost, a lot of folks are looking at you because they think you want to be a
So what's
president.
a provost? Because a lot of folk may not know what that is.
That's a good question. And people ask me that. When I was a provost, and folks would ask me, they said, "What's a provost?" It was difficult to tell them what it is.
Right.
Provost is basically the chief academic officer in higher education. Functions kind of as a vice president. It's kind of second in command at a university. And so all the operations at a university is really, the provost will oversee those operations.
Right.
So it's kind of the second in command.
I got it.
Yeah.
I knew that, but I know a lot of times.
No, you're right.
We having conversations and folk that work in that field, they say things, and the rest of us, or some of us, may not know what it means. I got lucky this time. I knew what it was.
I know.
but let me ask you something. So, working or being in a position as the chancellor of a university, what's that like? I know what leadership is like, but I can only imagine what it would be like working in higher ed.
Yeah, when I think about the position, and I try to tell folks, and people ask, what do you do day to day?
Yeah.
Kind of day to day operations. And it's complex. I have my hand in everything that happens at the university, the operations, and what happens with a university like Winston Salem State University, a state-supported institution. And if you're a state-supported institution, you understand what's that like.
Pause for a second.
Yes.
So a lot of times, when people say I'm a state-supported school versus a not state-supported, what does that mean? Educators.
I think that's another great question, and thanks for asking, because what happens is there are standalone universities that are entities in and of themselves. Those are private institutions.
Give me an example.
For example, Shaw University is a private institution. Davidson University is a private institution, which means that they have their own board and they operate independently. State-supported institutions in North Carolina are part of the UNC system of higher education, which now has 17 campuses, 16 universities, and 1 high school are part of that overall system. Now, that's governed by the state. State provides resources to those institutions more so than state-supported institutions, although state does provide some resources.
Is there an advantage to being state-supported versus a Davidson or a university that's not?
Well, it depends upon who you ask. Those institutions who have been around for a long time, like Duke University, is a private institution. They've had an opportunity to build their own resources from their graduates, from alumni, from corporate organizations. Everybody understands in order for them to exist, they have to provide resources. So alumni will come out and really give to those universities more so than a state-supported institution, because the thinking is that you're getting your money from the state, that the state is supporting your operations and your ability to provide an education to the citizens of North Carolina, because that's what the UNC system is. It's really catered towards those citizens, although we have a high percentage of students who come from out of state. The real focus is on the citizens of North Carolina.
I like that. That. Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So do you follow guidelines by being a state-supported school? You have guidelines that you have to follow. So let's say I wanted to come to your school and I've got to meet state guidelines, right?
Yeah.
And let's say I don't meet those guidelines. You couldn't let me in.
I could not. You have to qualify to be admitted to a UNC system school. Academically, you have to qualify.
So if I went to a private school, would I have to meet those same requirements? Could they let me in if they wanted to?
They have more flexibility in terms of who they can let in
more
or
flexibility.
not. More so than a state-supported institutions. Although, if you got great leadership at those institutions, they know in order for them to survive, they have to have high-quality students. So they probably have put in place measures to make sure that when students come, they're well prepared as well. Although from a state standpoint, that's already set, and we know how you have to perform academically, what kinds of scores you have to have, what kind of test scores, what kind of GPA you have to have. There are minimum requirements in order to get into a UNC system school. Although we fought over the years to have some flexibility in that, because Sheriff, in your work, we know there are always diamonds in the rough. There are always folks who don't do well in high school, but all of a sudden they come out and they do great things. So we've fought to have some flexibility in admission standards. And as chancellor, I do have the flexibility to be able to take chances on a few students, about 1% of students that come to Winston-Salem State University. I can admit not under those restrictions. So I can take a hard look at a student and I can say, even though you're not performing well academically, I know you've done great things in the community. You got great references. You've done some great things. And we don't believe that this is a reflection of who you are as a student. So I can have some flexibility to take chances on a few students.
Well, you know what? I want to publicly thank you because you took chances on two of mine, and they did graduate, right? And it was the grooming. It was getting in a culture and starting to see some things differently. Thank God that they both finished. I appreciate that. I used to joke with you all the time.
I know you did.
Yeah, and say, are they going to ever graduate? Yeah. Well, both of them, they finally did. And they're doing great things now. They have reached that level of, they know who they are. It's almost like they're coming into their own.
Right.
They know their value. So let me ask you a question. So being the chancellor at Winston-Salem State, I know a lot of challenges come with it, a lot of things that you see on a day-to-day basis. And I always say that education to me is a true emancipator.
Sure.
How do you deal with the time that we're living in? Are the numbers dropping in terms of kids coming to school? Are they increasing or are they staying the same?
Well, one of the things that we have, even during the pandemic, Sheriff, we've had an increase in enrollment.
Really?
Which really surprised me because we didn't know what to expect. In 2020, we let in our largest freshman class in 10 years.
Wow.
1,007 students in 2020 in the midst of a pandemic. So we didn't know what to expect. And as a result of that, we've had an increase this year of about 1%. We had a drop in terms of first-time freshmen who came to the university, but we had an increase in retention. That's what we're working on. So when a student comes, we want to make sure that they get everything they need in order to be successful. And so one of the challenges is when you have folks who come from under-resourced communities like we have, about 70% of our students come from families that make less than $50,000 a year, certainly less than $75,000. And here's something that will blow our listeners away. About 17% of our students come from families that make less than $25,000 a year, which is amazing. And you think, how do those folks, how do they live? How do they navigate the higher education space with coming from those kinds of resources? And so we have first-generation students who come from under-resourced communities. And the idea is we believe that your zip code and where you come from doesn't define your intelligence or doesn't define your ability to be successful. What we know is that we can go into those areas, and if we get those students to come to Winston-Salem State University, if we can wrap our arms around them, if we can provide the kind of support that we have, and what we're talking about now in our new strategic plan is how do we unleash the genius in every single student that comes to WSSU. So how do we do that? And that is by creating and making sure that we're student-centered, we're student support, everything they need in order to be successful. So when the students come, one of the difficulties that we have is helping them transition from freshman year to graduation without getting derailed by some issue that happens in their life, by getting derailed by the lack of financial aid or financial support. So we do everything we can to retain them. So while we let in those large classes in the last 2 years, how do we get them through the pipeline? That's where we made our greatest strides in terms of being able to provide resources, because you and I know, and you've seen this happen, you can have a student, and if they come from an under-resourced family, and if there is something that happens in that family, if there is an emergency, a medical emergency, if there is a bill that can't be paid, anything can derail these students on their way to graduation. So we monitor them. We hopefully give them a certain amount of scholarship dollars, and also a certain amount of resources to be able to help them navigate some of these spaces. What I found, this is you will find this interesting. When I came to Winston-Salem State in 2015, I received a report on my desk. We had almost 300 students that attended in the fall that did not return to campus that spring. My first year in 2015.
300?
300, Sheriff. But of the 300, they had a GPA of a 2.8 or higher and had already completed 90 plus hours. So the question that I ask,
exactly,
if a person has already demonstrated, one, that they can do the work, they've completed the hours, they've also demonstrated they can be successful with a GPA of 2.8 or higher.
Why didn't they come by?
That's a good question. See, you asked a great question. I asked the same question. Oftentimes it has to do with not having enough money to get to the end. So we created what we call these almost home or partway home, sometimes I forget the name, of scholarships that we can give students in order for them to stay in school and be successful. That first year in 2018.
What's the scholarship called?
I think it's partway home or halfway, almost home or something like that.
Can people give to it?
People can give to it. But here's the data. So in that year, we had 30 students that we were able to give these scholarships to. 29 of those students graduated that semester. Sheriff, we've been keeping data over the past 2 years. We've been able to give these scholarships to students in a span of over 170 of these awards, and 168 have graduated. Now, it's not a lot. Sometimes it's $500. Sometimes it's $100.
It's called Almost Home Scholarship?
Yep.
And they can give it at Winston-Salem State?
They can give it at Winston-Salem State.
So I'm going to ask everybody that follows us, listen to us, right?
Yeah.
We got about 40-some thousand people that say they follow us and listen to us. And so I'm going to ask them that, we always talk about better together. We talk about in this community what directly affects one, indirectly affects us all. We talk about how we're strong together.
Yeah.
And there has to be a giving of time or resource. We constantly preach that in the community. I'm a firm believer of that. And so what I'm going to ask is that if you're able, and you're willing, let's do something like that. Reach out to Winston-Salem State and give to Almost Home Scholarship. I'm going to challenge people to do that. And then I'm glad you mentioned that we've got some things that we're working on. I'm glad you shared that with me. Amazing what we find out in conversation and dialogue, how we can help one another. Almost Home Scholarship.
Yes.
That's for students who are doing well, they're excelling, but they've run out of funds. I like that. I like that. Moving forward, then, tell me this. So, as a chancellor, is it difficult competing for students? Is it difficult because you got so many in North Carolina? You got quite a few universities in North Carolina. I don't know the exact numbers, but you got quite a few. Is it difficult?
Well, I'll say it has gotten increasingly more difficult over the years, and that is because in North Carolina, we think about making sure that we educate these students that come to the UNC system of higher education.
Okay.
So you have a lot of choices. If you grow up in North Carolina and you want to go to a state-supported school, you got 16 choices that you can decide upon.
Yeah.
But as a state, we've begun to focus on, say, rural students and students who come from certain counties. But what happens is that the entire system is interested in those students. Think about 20, 30 years ago, Winston-Salem State was probably one of the few handful of universities that really catered to those communities. Now everybody is catering to those communities. So one of the priorities that the UNC system has is educating students who come from rural counties and from rural North Carolina. Well,
Wow.
I tell folks that Winston-Salem State has been doing that for 129 years. So there is now, I think, more opportunities for students. And some of these universities, such as a UNC Chapel Hill or NC State or some of the other well-funded universities, certainly have more resources than Winston-Salem State. And so sometimes they can offer those students a greater or larger financial package. And so to be able to cover, all their expenses and so forth. So I think because most of the universities are going after the same students these days makes it a little difficult and challenging sometimes. But I think we have been in this business certainly for, 129 years. We've established ourselves as a first choice institution. Sheriff, during our last strategic plan, when I came here, we did a survey and we asked students, do you want to be here? Was this your first choice?
Wow.
And about 5 years ago, about 40% of students said we were their first choice. Now, today, about 65, almost 70% of students say that we are their first choice. So people are coming, the students are coming to Winston-Salem State, not because they couldn't get in somewhere else, but because they want to be here. And that's important. And that doesn't happen across a lot of universities. That percentage of students who say that we're their first choice is one of the highest in the state. So a lot of folks want to go certain places,
Right.
they don't get in,
Right.
and they end up falling back. So the fact that we're now a first choice institution speaks volumes for Winston-Salem State University.
I know Winston-Salem State has come a long way. I feel like I was a student there, which I was for a short time. I went down to Pfeiffer in Mosstown, Pfeiffer College, and didn't do well when I got down there. Pledged and lost my way, and they sent me back home. Took my scholarship, basketball. Come on back to the house. And when I got back here, I never forget. My dad said that you didn't want to go when it was free. I definitely not gonna pay for it to go back. So I took my first little job over at what was Kmart then, which is now Gabe's, right there on Peters Creek. And in between, I was taking classes at Winston-Salem State, trying to get my GPA up so I could transfer back to Pfeiffer, trying to get myself back together. And I ended up not finishing at Winston-Salem State, not finishing at Pfeiffer. I ended up taking a job with the police department and ended up enrolling over at High Point because I realized that they were in the same conference and all my credits transferred over. And that's where I finally graduated from, got my undergraduate degree at High Point. But I look back at the Winston-Salem State now versus what it used to be, and it has grown tremendously. I mean, the school, the nursing program has always been outstanding. I always give shout out to that for several reasons. One, my wife was a graduate of the nursing school over there prior to her passing. And some of the work that your nursing students have done coming down here at the detention center. We were recruiting over there when Ms. Williams was the director of nursing here at the detention center. We was working in conjunction with Winston-Salem State Nursing Program. But I have seen the school grow. And so what do you see on the horizon? I saw where several years ago you entered into Division I AA, right? What was it?
Well,
planning.
We made an attempt to go to Division I.
Okay. And now you are back.
Division II.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So tell me some of the challenges before we start to wrap it up. Some of the challenges being a chancellor here in Winston-Salem at SU.
Yeah.
I know that it's not just peaches and roses. I know that so many times, when you sit in a city where you have so many universities, you have the School of the Arts, you have Wake Forest, you have Salem, you have Carolina University, you have Forsyth Tech. There's so many opportunities, there's so many options for a student to choose. And I guess each student has to find his own little niche, right? What they like or where they think they're going to be successful at.
Yeah. Well, I'll answer your question this way. When I first came to Winston-Salem State in 2015, and why I came and why I thought this was a great place, and I still think it is. I think it's one of the more amazing places that I've seen, and this goes back to a conversation you and I were having before we came on the air. We won't revisit that. But one of the things that happened, I was in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the time, and I read this report that came out by a group of researchers in Harvard that said that if you were born in poverty in Forsyth County, that it was the third most difficult county in America to escape poverty. Now, that literally blew me away. It was one of those times when you're reading and you read in bed and something happens and you just kind of
can't let it go.
You sit up. So I sat up when I saw that. Here, how is that possible in Forsyth County with one of the richest and wealthiest counties around? And in fact,
without question,
if you read the reports, the history of Winston-Salem, at one point, Winston-Salem was one of the wealthiest, highest per capita income of any city in the South, with several Fortune 500 companies.
Produced a lot of millionaires.
So how is that possible? So with that in mind, coming to Winston-Salem, I knew that Winston-Salem State had to be a catalyst for change. And catalyst for change meaning that we have to think about equity. We have to think about how all of our citizens can take advantage of the great things that this community has to offer. So every day, if you ask me, how do I live and how do I work every day I want every student at Winston-Salem State University, every person that works, all 1,200 folks who work there, all 5,000 students who attend, to be able to walk in this community and have a sense of belonging in this community. You and I, Sheriff, because of you being Sheriff and because of me being Chancellor at Winston-Salem State, we get a chance to participate in the great things that are happening in this city because of our position.
Mm-hmm.
If we were not in these positions, it would be difficult for us to do what we do. So what I say is I want every student at Winston-Salem State to experience this city the way in which I experience this city.
That's a very interesting point that you just brought up. Me being from here, I've seen a lot of changes take place in this community over the years, even from when I was a little boy. I love this place. Like you, we could be anywhere in the world we choose to be, but we choose to be here. I love this community for so many reasons. I think that we're at a place now where so many changes are happening. People are realizing this thing about together to better, how better we are together. They're realizing that the change. And so I'm excited to be a part of it.
Right.
I'm grateful that the people have allowed me to be a part of that. I get criticized a lot of times about law enforcement. You're here to serve and protect, right? I think it's more than that. I think it's bringing the community together, educational institutions, because that piece of education is what changes people's lives, is what gives them hope, is what shows them the greatness, it gives them the skill set. And so anytime I can be a part of something positive for changing in this community, I'm going to be there. Whatever my role is, I'll assume it and perform it. I applaud you for what you do. I've watched you from a distance when you first got here, when you first showed up at the church and spoke. I have seen you out at the football games. I've seen you out at a lot of settings, and I think you do a phenomenal job here. You are what we needed here, and your leadership is noted. What I would say to you is that keep doing what you're doing. Anything you need from us, we're here. We want to be a part of the change at the sheriff's office. Almost 700 of us now. We've grown. I want to be a part of the change. We want to be a part of the community, because I think we're all intertwined in this thing. So, and I promise you, we're going to revisit that almost home scholarship thing. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. And I like it so much because you hit it on the head. And I always go back to my own life experiences with my children. My son started out at another university playing football. Then when he decided he didn't want to class no more, they took a scholarship. So that meant he had to pay for that semester. He left in the middle of the semester, and they sent him a bill.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Well, when he got himself right, got his head, out from under a rock, for lack of better words, he decided he wanted to go back to school and enroll at SU. Well, that was a good thing. But the problem was he couldn't get his transcripts because he owed the school X amount of money. And a part of me was like, do I go pay this for him, or do I let him figure it out
Right.
And I realized that if I didn't pay it for him,
Hmm.
he would never have finished school. He would have never been able to get into SU because they weren't going to release his transcripts at the
Right.
other school. And I thought about it long and hard, right? And I'm just grateful that at the time I was in a position to write them the check to release his transcripts. But I think about that. Just what if
Sure.
he'd have never finished school? He wouldn't have. And so that almost home scholarship, I think, is a great scholarship because there are some kids that are in situations not that they created. It's just that they ran out of money.
That's right.
And it happened to them.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Look, Sheriff, I'll tell you, I can echo every single thing that you said about this city.
Yeah.
And I also can echo about you and your leadership as well.
I appreciate you, Doc.
Winston Salem State University is in a good place. We say that they're not only coming to WSSU, but they're coming to this city.
Yeah.
And this city is a safe place. This city is an important place because of your leadership and others like you in this community.
I appreciate
Well, I
that.
will say, and I can't leave without saying, this city's also embraced Winston-Salem State University. I can only speak for my administration.
Yeah.
But since I've been at WSSU, this community has really looked at our university different. They supported the university different. We're in a different place today.
Oh, yeah.
People give more to Winston-Salem State University. We have, amazingly, Sheriff, over the past 3 years, we've tripled our endowment.
That's
We've
amazing.
tripled our endowment.
That's amazing.
We've had partnerships with folks in this community. We now talk about having signature partners.
There you
And
go.
many of those signature partners come from this community. I'm going to be meeting on Thursday to finalize another major signature partner with Haynes Brand.
That's
I can't make
strong.
the announcement yet because we haven't
I got
finalized
it.
the deal. But I went to Haynes Brand and I said, here you are, a national, world-renowned, organization, and you're in this community, and we need to have a great partnership. And they came through. I can tell you, when we make this announcement, people are really going to be surprised. They're going to say, "Wow, this is great." So that's how this city and how this community has embraced us.
That's strong.
We want to be a part of that. We are a part of that. I told the mayor when I first came here in 2015, if you're going to be a city of arts and innovation, and if you're going to be a great city, you can't do it without Winston-Salem State. We worked extremely hard in that partnership to build goodwill, to build trust, and now folks look at our institution,
Oh, yeah.
and they say, things are really, really going well at Winston-Salem State University.
I appreciate you, Doc. I appreciate your leadership. As always, it's good to see you. If we
Always.
can do anything for you, don't hesitate. We're here for you. I want to thank you all for joining us off the cuff with Dr. Robinson, Chancellor at Winston Salem State. Thank you. Have a great rest of your week. I love you and thank you for the support.